Let's talk about Peter Rabbit. A dearly beloved character, an essential part of my childhood, a king among bunnies. So naturally, when I heard they were making a movie, I was excited. When I saw the trailer, I became wary but was still hopeful. And then, when I saw the movie, I had to sit and watch for 95 painful minutes as my childhood crashed and burned right in front of me. Beatrix Potter turns in her grave, Mrs. Tiggywinkle hides her eyes in shame, and all the rabbits of England weep. Yes, it was that bad. Before I get into this though, hello and welcome to all of my new subscribers. After Jordan and I collaborated, my subscriber count more than doubled, with most of you undoubtedly coming over from her channel. So thank you so much to all of you who subscribed, and also thank you so much to Jordan. It was fantastic to work with her, and not only was she amazing, but she also sent me so many of you lovely people, so for that I'm incredibly grateful. I am very happy to have you all. So, Peter Rabbit. I did not plan on making a video about this movie, but I realised that I had so much to say on it that literally right after I got back from the cinema I just sat down and wrote it all down. I tried to make this short, I really did, but classic me, I seem to have a problem with keeping things brief. And I realised that I have so much to say, I'm actually going to have to split this into two videos. I am going to try something new with this though. So in the first video, this video, I'll be talking about what went wrong with this movie in my opinion, so you know, fairly standard stuff. But for my second video, and I have no idea whether there'll be any interest in this or not, but I'm going to talk about how I would fix it, how I would change the movie, to make it, in my opinion, a good movie. So I'll be going into plot, character, etc. The thing with Peter Rabbit, what frustrated me so much with this movie is it wasn't just a terrible movie, it was a terrible movie, which could have been fantastic. Not only that, but it should have been fantastic. Like, everything was there, it should have been a brilliant movie, and it just wasn't. So my opinion on the film inspired me to make a video on, how I would improve it and make it a good movie in my opinion. And I think it'd be kind of fun and interesting to do. For me anyway. I don't know if any of you guys will be interested in that at all, or care particularly, but whatever, I'm gonna do it. I will probably upload the second video just the day after I upload this one, because really they should have been one video, and also I'm just gonna film it all in one go. So yeah. Right, so it's going to be a long one, so I'd say grab a snack, but quite honestly a 3-course meal would probably be more appropriate. Obviously there'll be spoilers, so if you care then don't watch this video. If you haven't seen the movie but don't care, then I will briefly explain the plot. So obviously this film is based on Beatrix Potter's illustrated children's books, which originated as a story in a letter that she wrote to a sick child in 1893. Peter Rabbit isn't the only character, she wrote a variety of books with loads of different animal characters. So yeah, these books are charming, wonderful stories about badly behaved Peter Rabbit, his cousin Benjamin Bunny, and his sisters Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail. The villain is old Mr. Mcgregor, into whose delicious garden the rabbits frequently sneak into, and who once baked Peter's father into a pie. Right, quick summary of the movie. Peter, who is now an orphan, his sisters and Benjamin Bunny at the beginning of the movie are stealing from old Mr. Mcgregor, who is now a widower. Just when Peter is caught by Mr. McGregor has a heart attack right in front of him and dies. Here the story really kicks off. Enter Thomas McGregor, Mr. McGregor's nephew who never really knew his great uncle, and who lives in London and works in Harrods, the very posh department store. Thomas inherits this unknown great uncle's house, moves there for a while so he can do up the house and then sell it and get loads of money from it and then move back to London. That's his plan. Thomas is also a massive control freak who hates the countryside. Next door to Thomas lives Bee, a woman who loves the rabbits and who, as well as weird modern art, also paints beautiful illustrations of nature and wildlife in the same style as Beatrix Potter's original illustrations. So she is clearly based on Beatrix Potter. Thomas and Bee fall in love right at the beginning of the movie for no reason that I can see, and the fact that Thomas is supposed to be doing up the house to sell is not really mentioned at all for the rest of the movie until the very end. Thomas hates the rabbits and the wildlife, and from here on in, the movie literally just turns into a prank movie, with Peter and Thomas pranking and trying to kill, yes that's right, I said kill each other. Thomas pretends to love the rabbits when Bee is around, and then tries to kill them when she's not. Peter is trying to get Thomas to move out, which makes no sense, Peter. Just literally wait for him to do up the house, stop making everything so bloody difficult for him, and then he'll move out anyway. So basically Thomas eventually snaps and decides to put explosives down the rabbit burrow, which he does. He, however, doesn't detonate them, but then him and Peter have this huge, ridiculous fight in the garden anyway with, like, explosions, him throwing explosive at Peter, explosions going off, Peter throwing tomatoes back at him. Why? B hears this fight and comes over because there's explosions going off. Thomas, as usual, pretends that he's doing nothing wrong. Peter gets angry that Thomas keeps lying and pretending, so he presses the button to blow up his own burrow to prove to B that Thomas is a liar. And yeah, the burrow explodes, the tree that's on top of the burrow falls, and when it falls it hits B's house and smashes her conservatory and, like, ruins it. So obviously B and Thomas fall out. Thomas sells his house, moves back to London, keeps working in Harrods. B decides to move out of her house as well because reasons. Peter goes to London to try and convince Thomas to go back to convince B not to move out or something. Thomas and Peter have another huge fight in Harrods, which I think results in Thomas losing his job again, but it doesn't really matter because at that point Peter eventually convinces Thomas. He eventually convinces Thomas to go back with him to the Lake District, which is where it's all set, by the way. So Thomas goes back with him, they explain everything to B, Peter comes clean, they get rid of the people who bought Thomas's house, and they all live happily ever after, I assume. There's also a little epilogue bit where it has them, you know, a few years later with all the bunnies and the rabbits in a toy shop that Thomas now runs instead of working at the toy department in Harrods. Right, now that that's out of the way, let's go into why this movie sucked. I think it was trying to be like the Paddington or Nanny McPhee movies and achieve that charming British family movie status, but it just wasn't anywhere close. There was no character development, a bad, barely there plot, incredibly not hilarious jokes, and terrible, jarring pop songs. I actually really liked how Thomas was set up as a character. As I said at the beginning, he was a control freak, obsessed with his job, who hated the countryside. There was loads of room for wonderful character development, but unfortunately, he did not change at all. The whole way through the film, he was just as highly strung, just as much as a control freak, and hated wildlife at the end of it, just as much as he'd done at the beginning. When he goes back to London at the end of the film, he has a conversation with someone who says that they've been trying to get hold of him. He says something like about how there's no phone signal in the countryside. They say, how barbaric, or something like that. And he says something along the lines of, I actually really enjoyed it. Really, Thomas? Because you could have fooled me. I actually laughed out loud in the cinema at this bit because this revelation of his came completely from nowhere. Literally in the scene before, well, not quite, but a few scenes ago, he'd been trying to blow everything up and blow up the wildlife, and suddenly in the space of like 5 minutes, he misses it? This was a really, really shoddy attempt at pretending that there'd been character development when there really hadn't. At the beginning of the movie, there's a moment where Thomas has a breakdown at work because he didn't get a promotion, and his job and earning money is all he cares about. And he also hated the thought of anything being out of his control. He reacted violently and smashed stuff up. At the end of the movie, when Peter tries to convince him to return, Thomas has a breakdown again at work because he hates Peter, and he hates that Peter is out of his control, and what do you know it, he again reacts violently and smashes stuff up. He's still a control freak. This really demonstrates Thomas's complete lack of character development. I really like the trope where a character is put in a similar situation at the end of the movie as they were at the beginning of it. But the whole point of doing that is to show how much the character has changed, with the character reacting differently the second time around. It's meant to show how they've outgrown their old life and old situation, how their world is so much bigger now, how different things are now important to them, and how they are no longer satisfied with the old way of doing things. At this point, often the character will have a huge revelation and leave their old situation to return to their new situation, which they now realise is what they truly want. This didn't happen to Thomas. He reacted in exactly the same way when he realised he couldn't control everything. What was the point in doing this then? All I got from this scene was confirmation that, yes, I was right, Thomas is still a dick and has learned nothing. Peter had to beg and convince Thomas to go back until he finally agreed. So where was the moment of noble revelation for Thomas's character? The fact that Thomas only pretended the whole way through this movie to love wildlife to impress a pretty girl means that he has no character development and is instead a lying snake. It's not even like he really cared about B, because if he had, he would have at least tried to understand why the wildlife was so important to her, as you do with people you love. You start to see things through their eyes. Thomas didn't love Bea because if he had, then he would have seen, or at least tried to see, that what she loved had value, but instead he just didn't give a shit. Instead, he fancied her and pretended to be someone different to basically get in her pants. Obviously, this is a kids' movie, so that didn't actually happen, but that's how he was behaving. He pretended to be something he wasn't, right up until the very end of the movie, because he's a snaky little coward who wasn't man enough to just say, "Oh, I disagree with you, Bea. I think rabbits are the scum of the earth, but hey, you're pretty damn hot, so let's get it on." Which would have made me respect him so much more as a character, because at least he was honest and had nerve. And then maybe he could have grown and come around to agreeing with her, or at least respecting her opinion. But no, there was no great, deeper change within him. He had no development. Like I said, at the end of the movie he was back in the exact same situation as he had been at the beginning, and he acted in exactly the same way. So we have something similar with Peter Rabbit's character, who by the way was just horrific in this movie. He was basically just James Corden at his most irritating. And I mean, whatever you think of James Corden, whether you like him or not, I don't think there's any denying that he is like one of the last people you'd think of to cast Peter Rabbit. It was so miscast. Casting him was, I think, a terrible decision. I mean, just think about Paddington and Ben Whishaw and how absolutely perfect he was for that role. James Corden and Peter Rabbit, no, nowhere close. Peter Rabbit in this movie was insanely unlikable. And I'm not having a go at James Corden now. I'm not blaming all this on James Corden. This is mostly the writing, this bit. But yeah, he was insanely unlikable. He came across as a bit of a Jack the Lad. Bit of a laugh maybe for 5 minutes, but starts to get really, really annoying, childish and attention-seeking really quickly. You can do cheeky and charming with a heart of gold. That's fine, but Peter Rabbit in this movie did not have a heart of gold. Far, far from it. He certainly was not nice. Really not nice. In fact, he was a psychopath. He had no empathy whatsoever. He was straight up trying to kill someone for most of this film, and he also blew up his own home on purpose. I mean, how am I supposed to care about this character? Seriously, please, someone tell me. He's mental. Mental. He's a bloody murderous nutcase. There's also a scene in this movie where Peter Rabbit is smoking a carrot like it's weed, and it also clearly implies that he's high in this scene, and it was clearly supposed to be like meant to be funny, but it was just so stupid and pointless and such a portrayal of his character and of Beatrix Potter's stories. What? Hi, Peter Rabbit? Beatrix Potter would, I don't even know what to say. I mean, it's just stupid. It's so stupid. Peter Rabbit now does drugs and tries to kill people. What? What? Am I crazy? Am I insane? Like, because I just don't understand how, I mean, what? Literally sitting there in the cinema going, did the people making this movie not see? Like, maybe, I don't know, you know, beloved Peter Rabbit, the people making the movie just thought, oh yeah, let's take this beloved, sweet, lovely children's character and make him into a murderer. Well, he didn't actually kill her, okay, a wannabe murderer who gets high frequently. What? Who does drugs? What? What? Is this like Peter Rabbit the mob leader or something? I mean, what the bloody hell, like... Anyway, yeah, basically that whole scene made it feel like a stupid Hollywood comedy about a college fraternity or something. It was just so completely wrong. I'm sorry about that rant, but it's insane. There's this brilliant review by Stuart Heritage in The Guardian, which I'm going to quote part of because it sums it up so perfectly. So he says, "There's something genuinely harrowing about the sight of Peter Rabbit, gentle Edwardian Peter Rabbit, thoughtlessly injuring some birds or grabbing a pile of lettuce leaves and making it rain like a banker in a strip club, or literally twerking." Pretty much. Peter also showed no fear in this film, and not in a good, wow, this character is so brave and endearing sort of way, but in a, He's putting himself and his friends directly into danger for a laugh and doesn't understand that he could literally die. Wow, this character is a cold-blooded, reckless, terrifying, psychopathic sadist who would die manically laughing as he and his friends were slowly ripped apart. Sort of way. I think they were going for lovable rogue, but they missed the mark. He also had zero character development, and believe me, he needed character development. So after he blows up his burrow, this is supposed to be when he realises that he'd gone too far. Why, this was crossing the line and suddenly going too far into the realms of unethical and actual attempted murder wasn't crossing the line. I have no idea, but anyway, blowing up the burrow, yeah, that's crossing the line apparently, okay, whatever. But yeah, after he crossed that line, the problem with this is that Peter was not held to account by the people around him. His sisters and cousin didn't seem to blame him or care, and Peter just gave him a quick rubbish apology and everything's fine again. But I don't even see why he needed to apologise because they didn't seem mad at him anyway. So yeah, he didn't actually have to learn anything. In stories where you have a charismatic leader who is also selfish or reckless, you quite often have a moment where they go too far. But unlike in Peter Rabbit, at this point in most movies or books, this character will lose the people around them who have up to this point loyally followed them. And this loss of the people around them is actually really important for the character and for the story. They realise that not everything is about them. They realise that they're not all that, and they have to learn the value of the people around them because they suddenly see what it's like that they're not there anymore and go, oh, wow, okay, I'm not, everything's not actually about me, because when I lose all the people around me, what am I? Oh my god, what's the point of it? And they see, they realise. So here the character will often see how awful they've been, and they realise just how important their loved ones are. At this point, they often do something brilliant and dramatic to show how sorry they are. This character, who up until this point has always been selfish and does things for themselves, does something selfless, and thus we see their growth. This didn't happen with Peter. He didn't lose any of the faithful people around him, or rabbits, and thus he didn't learn their value. He wasn't sorry. He said he was, but his dramatic reading of speeches seemed to me insincere and more like attention-seeking than a genuine apology. Proven by the fact that he let Benjamin fall off a train just so he could read his rubbish little apology speech. He was, just like Snaky Thomas, just as awful at the end of the movie as he had been at the beginning of it. So, other things I hated. The Flopsy Bunnies, Peter's sisters, were flat non-characters and painfully unfunny. Like, really not funny. They were meant to be the comic relief, I think. But oh my god, wow. Like, watching it, sitting in the cinema, I was cringing, going, that is meant to be a joke? Is it really? Yeah, wow. Really cringed me out. It was painful to watch. Yeah. And then there was also Benjamin, who again was flat. Just non-character. The narration that they had sort of throughout the story was cringy and terrible, and again, not funny. So were all the bad chart-topping hits that made up the soundtrack. Like, why? And there were a few stupid dance numbers. Okay. There was also no plot, as I said before. This whole thing was a boring prank movie. The fact that Thomas was supposed to be doing up his house was mentioned at the beginning, and then never mentioned again, like, until the very end. So, therefore, he had no character motivations. There was nothing he was working towards. Nothing, there was nothing driving him as a character. And nor did B. She didn't have a character motivation, or any of the other rabbits. And the only thing Peter seemed to be motivated by was causing pain and or death. So there's that. One thing I really hated about this movie was that they were trying to be self-aware and make a commentary on story structure and break the fourth wall, but it was really badly done. It just ended up like it was trying to parody itself, but doing it terribly. And every time it did that, it brought me right out of the story. Like, it completely disconnected me from it, and just like, okay, well, you're trying too hard to be clever. They were trying too hard to be clever in a story that was really not clever at all. Trying to show off in a movie that was not smart, but trying, oh, look how clever we are, how funny. Yeah, okay, doesn't work though, because it's a shit movie anyway. And it disconnected me from it further again, and just reminded me yet again that yes, I'm just watching a really bad movie with... there was a moment Peter looked directly at the camera, broke the fourth wall and said something about hoping they don't get complaints from the audience. It was meant to be funny or witty and clever, and it just so wasn't. It was also really obnoxious and completely at odds with, like, Beatrix Potter's whole vibe and just everything about her books. There was also a point where Peter says something to Benjamin like, your character flaw is that you always do what I say and follow me into danger, and my character flaw is that I'm reckless. Like, he actually said that in the movie. If Peter was that self-aware, then he should have stopped being such a little prick, is all I have to say about that. You can't explicitly comment on story structure and character and tropes in a story where you haven't managed to do it right. If Benjamin was a well-rounded character and the plot was well structured, then fine, still a bit annoying maybe, but like fair enough. But it wasn't well done. It should have been obvious, this, without Peter having to spell it out for the audience. I can't quite decide if all that commentary was there for cheap laughs, or because they couldn't actually be bothered to write it in. So they just like explicitly said all this stuff for the audience, going, this is his character flaw, this is his character flaw, this is his character trait, in case you missed it. Oh, this is what this means, by the way, the fact that, yeah, this is why it's important for Peter, because, you know, we'll just explicitly tell you, rather than bothering to write it convincingly. The humour, again, was terrible. Plot and character were sacrificed for a cheap laugh that wasn't even a laugh. Like when Peter let Benjamin fall off the train so he could read his speech. That was meant to be funny, but you sacrificed his supposed character development to do that. It was so blatantly obvious when they wanted you to laugh as well. Like, here guys, here's the joke, don't miss it. You know, I almost expected a laugh track, honestly. Yeah. No subtlety, at all. None. Okay. Now, if you can believe it, onto the thing that probably bothered me the most about this movie. Yes, all of that I said so far doesn't really compare to this bit. I warn you, here comes a rant. I'm gonna have to give you some background information in order to explain this properly. But I promise this is important, I have a point, and in my opinion this is actually an essential part of why this film failed and led to a lot of the other problems. For me, it's also personal, which is, again, probably why it annoys me the most out of everything. Okay. Right, so if you're British, particularly if you're Northern, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. But for you lovely foreigners, I'm going to have to give you a bit of context on British, or in this case it's specifically English, social politics. Right, so in this country we have what is known as the North-South divide.
The North-South divide, yes. I believe we should build a wall and make it official. I do. Obviously, you know, Northerners can build it. Well, pay for it.
There's a bit of an us and them mentality between the North and the South, with a number of differences including economic, cultural and political. I myself am a Northerner, born and bred. Yes, I know I don't really have a Northern accent, but I was born in Newcastle, north of Hadrian's Wall, and have grown up in North Yorkshire since I was about 6. Probably take what I say with a pinch of salt, because bear in mind that I'm a very, very patriotic Northerner, and I won't pretend to be unbiased, because I am and naturally side with the North, but I'll do my best to explain. I actually went to school down south for a year down in Hampshire, and now I study in London, and I also studied for a year in Oxford as well, so I'm very familiar with the general, and I said general, not all, but the general attitude in the South towards Northerners.
Now, the Northerner is a friendly sort by nature, but will become irascible if they feel taunted. So until you have ascertained their level, it's very important to pretend to be one of their own.
All right, Arcade, will you take us down Withington for a quid?
JP, is he a cabbie?
They're all cabbies in the North, Giles, for a price.
And I say this as someone with many, many lovely southern friends. It's still true. So, of course, Britain is run from London, with most of the people who make important decisions about our country being from the South. Which means that they care mostly about the South, particularly London, more than they do about the North, though accuse any politician of this and they will be outraged and deny it till they're blue in the face. This presents itself in a number of ways, one of them being that the UK government spends far more money per person in the South than they do in the North. Just to say, I don't want this to come across like I'm trying to say that Northerners are an underclass or anything ridiculous like that, because it's not the case. But there are, like, certain subtle tensions, perhaps, and, like, cultural differences, which are important, again, for my point. Again, I say this as someone who spends a lot of time in the South and has many friends there who are all lovely people, and I don't at all mind their good-natured teasing. And To be fair, I'm also incredibly rude about the South, and so are a lot of Northerners as well, so it's all fair. It's all fair. However, it's still true that the general attitude in the South towards the North that I've come across is, who cares, they're irrelevant, they're all just farmers anyway. They're provincial, small-minded, uncultured, let's use the word wildlings, who live up there in that awful barren wilderness.
Hello there. We all love our northerners, don't we? I know I'd be lost without Yorkie here.
Here, lad, put what in for.
Ah, we grow to love their cheeky manner, their devotion, the simple joy they bring. Yorkie was adopted by my family while still a nipper, and naturally he's flourished in Sussex. But not every northerner is as lucky as Yorkie. Some of these poor creatures are so neglected and abused, it's almost as if they're back in the towns and cities of their birth.
The best way I can describe it to a non-Brit would be Game of Thrones. The attitudes and tensions between the Northerners up at Winterfell and the Southerners down in King's Landing is kind of how it is, though obviously nowhere near as bad. So the North thinks Southerners are self-important, pretentious snobs who are a little bit wimpy and soft, and the South thinks Northerners are uncultured, brash, irrelevant heathens. Kind of.
Mummy has something to tell you.
What is it, dear heart? Tell all.
Alice can't come to work today, so Mummy's had to arrange for an agency nanny to come round.
Mummy. No.
We must all be very brave.
I don't feel very well.
Be strong, my darlings, because there's something else you should know. Something much worse. This person the agency are sending us. She's from the North.
A massive exaggeration, of course, but you get what I mean. Sorry, I know I'm ranting, but I'm making an important point, I promise. What I'm saying, though, is that the north of England, particularly the rural north, has a very distinct and different culture and identity to London and the south. Here's the next really important bit of information. Beatrix Potter lived and set all of her stories in the Lake District, in Cumbria, in the north of England. Now, I'm from North Yorkshire, not Cumbria, which is on the east side of the country, and Cumbria is on the west. But as it's a very narrow little country, they're only 70 miles apart over the hills. And I used to walk in the Lake District a lot with my family as a child. I can't talk about the community and culture of the Lake District really with any great knowledge, but as a northerner who spent all my life growing up in the north, in a rural community, when I watched Peter Rabbit, I wasn't even convinced that whoever wrote it had any understanding of rural English culture, never mind the north specifically. If I hadn't known Beatrix Potter's connections with the Lake District, even as a northerner, I would have watched this movie and thought that it was set in the countryside just outside London. I think there was only perhaps one reference to the Lake District in this whole movie, and I don't remember any references to the north. I saw a review where an American reviewer said that it was all set in London, and I don't blame them because that's how it was portrayed. But it's not even close. The Lake District is all the way up the country. Everyone in this movie had a southern accent. Bee's accent was fine and didn't particularly bother me, as it wasn't specifically southern, it was just standard English. But the guys working in the local shop had London accents. And so did Peter Rabbit. James Corden has a London accent. Why was he cast? I'm not saying they shouldn't have cast a southerner or a Londoner, but cast someone who can then do a northern accent, or would put on a northern accent, or just cast a northerner. James Corden doesn't even have my kind of accent, where I just don't really have a regional accent. He had a southern accent, like a London accent. It's faint, yes, I'll give you that, not that strong, but it's still definitely a London accent. Peter Rabbit is a northern rabbit, so why does he sound like he was born in bloody London? The only person that I can recall with a vaguely northern accent was the taxi driver, and she wasn't in it for very long at all. Hollywood seems to think that the only important areas of England are London and the countryside immediately surrounding it. People in the south and in London also think this, in my experience.
Twat you, you cotton prick! Hurry and sight! Your mother's a whore! Get inside now! Inside, you bad northerner!
Sorry about Clive. There is a sign, though.
Now that I've given you guys a background and you have some idea of the tensions between the North and the South and how the government gives the South all the nice things, and not just that, but also all the cultural differences between the North and the South, I hope it makes sense about why doing that to this movie was such a stupid and mindless thing to do. It would be kind of like setting Little Women in Florida. The Lake District is a really, really beautiful place, but beautiful in a very different way to most of the south of England. It's a mountainous region with loads of lakes, as the name suggests, and in parts it's very rugged and moody and also rainy because they're on the other side of the Pennines, so they get all the rain. Beatrix Potter's stories, in my opinion, are inseparable from the Lake District. She was a conservationalist and she was passionate about the land and the local wildlife. Her work, in my opinion, is inseparable from that landscape, from little stone walls and mountains. It is beyond infuriating to see this distinctive landscape with its distinctive culture and distinctive people just trampled all over by the film industry and made into your standard, sterilised, pretty, rural, southern English countryside with no distinct culture or identity. They've stolen something which is so linked to the land and the local area, sterilised it, and sort of made it Hollywood friendly, if you like. There was a whole scene in that movie which was completely pointless and served no purpose other than to get in some great shots of London. Why? Why? London has absolutely nothing to do with the Peter Rabbit stories. Why is this movie a tourist advert for London and the South? I wouldn't care that London was in it, honestly, if they had done the Lake District justice, but in my opinion they didn't. Also, apparently most of the movie, from what I could find out, seems to have been filmed in Australia. Australia is nothing like the Lake District. I mean, it was beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't look like the Lake District. I think they maybe got in a few shots of the actual Lake District, although again, I couldn't find the information. But nowhere near enough. Like one at the beginning or something. It was a complete missed opportunity, in my opinion. Now, I looked into the people behind this film because I was convinced that they weren't even English, never mind Northern English. And what do you know, it was written and directed by 2 Americans. It was an Americanized Hollywood ideal version of England. Americans. Okay, no, I'm joking, but my point is that they exploited the story of Peter Rabbit without bothering to understand the people and culture and landscape that those books came out of. I honestly don't care if they're American, that's not my problem. I don't hate Americans, I promise. But my point is that they had a duty then to that source material and to Beatrix Potter to then, you know, try and understand it, and they utterly failed in that duty. It was bollocks. It was bollocks. I don't know, I think they just thought they didn't have to understand the culture of somewhere in order to make a movie about it, which is, it's stupid. That's like me trying to write a story set in New York or a small southern town in America or something. Would it be terrible, unrealistic, and unconvincing? Yes, it really would, because I have absolutely no idea of what it's like to live there. Actually, no, it's worse than that, because they didn't even try to pretend that it was set in the North. Like, it's like me stealing a deeply loved story set in Canada or rural America somewhere and going, I'll have that, thank you very much, and setting it wherever I want to set it and completely ignoring the culture and landscape that formed that book and also the meaning that that book is trying to convey, the messages behind it. It was a huge betrayal of Beatrix Potter's source material. She loved the Lake District. She worked for most of her life trying to protect the land and the wildlife there. I believe now that she's actually credited with having saved much of the rural landscape of the Lake District, because I think on her death she left lots of land to the National Trust and therefore, you know, helped protect it. So yeah, she worked for most of her life trying to protect this area that she adored, and they took it and they made it into a cheesy, wisecracking comedy. Beatrix Potter refused to sell the film rights of Peter Rabbit to Disney in her lifetime, so goodness knows what she would have thought of this abomination. Goodness knows. Where was the love of the land and wildlife in this movie? I didn't see it. I saw talking animals having a house party though, so I guess it's all okay. Right, okay, that's it. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you managed to make it all the way through that. And as I said, if anyone is interested, I'll be uploading part 2 probably tomorrow, although at this point that took me so long to film, longer than I thought. I don't know if I'm going to actually film the second video now. I probably should. I probably will. I think I will. I don't know. But yeah, anyway, thank you if you managed to stick by and watch all of that. Sorry for my rant. So yeah, hopefully I will see you for part 2 tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.